senators, and representatives, I have the distinguished honor of presenting.
By the late 19th century, Cuba's struggle for independence had reached a breaking point. Decades of Spanish oppression and two major uprisings had left the island in turmoil. But for many in the United States, Cuba's fight wasn't just a foreign conflict. It was a moral cause with striking parallels to America's own revolution. Today, we'll explore the history, key events, and the moral arguments that ultimately led the U.S. to intervene. Cuba's first major rebellion against Spain, the 10 Years' War, began in 1868. Led by wealthy planter Carlos Manuel de Céspedes, Cuban revolutionaries issued the Grito de Guerra, a call for independence and the abolition of slavery. While the rebellion failed to achieve independence, it planted the seeds of resistance that would later flourish. The war left Cuba devastated. Spain implemented harsh measures to suppress future revolts, and economic hardship deepened as Cuban industries struggled to recover. In 1895, Cuban rebels launched a renewed fight for freedom. José Martí, a poet, journalist, and revolutionary leader, played a key role in organizing the uprising. Martí's writings, including his famous essay Nuestra America, emphasized the importance of Cuban independence and warned against U.S. imperialism. The rebels adopted scorched-earth strategies, burning fields and destroying infrastructure to undermine Spanish control. These measures, though effective in drawing attention, also caused immense suffering among Cuban civilians. The Cuban struggle resonated deeply with many Americans, who saw similarities between Cuba's fight and their own revolution. Senator Henry Cabot Lodge argued in 1896, "The oppression of the Cuban people exceeds any grievances the American colonies faced under British rule." Beyond moral support, economic connections fueled American interest. Many U.S. businesses had investments in Cuban sugar plantations, and the island's instability posed risks to trade. American newspapers, particularly those owned by William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, capitalized on Cuba's plight. Headlines exaggerated Spanish atrocities, further galvanizing public opinion. These stories amplified calls for intervention, creating pressure on the U.S. government to act. Supporters, including Theodore Roosevelt and Henry Cabot Lodge, argued that America had a duty to stand up for liberty. They pointed to Spain's reconcentration camps, where hundreds of thousands of Cuban civilians died from starvation and disease. Meanwhile, opponents warned against entangling alliances and the risks of imperialism. They feared that intervening would set a precedent for future conflicts. By the late 1890s, Cuba's fight for independence had become more than a regional conflict. It was a moral and political dilemma for the United States. The suffering of the Cuban people, combined with growing public pressure and economic concerns, set the stage for America's involvement in the Spanish-American War. Ultimately, this chapter of history reminds us of the complex interplay between ideals, interests, and the pursuit of justice.